Hello and welcome back to the Keystone Kickoff Show. I'm Jim Galanti along with our promised guest, Shane Paul from forthebloggy.com. And I love the article that you wrote. Can you scheme your wide receivers open?
Short answer, yes. Brief overview. When you're going into a game and you know that you have a disadvantage somewhere, a lot of the times, the offensive coordinator has to get creative, right? Can't just chalk it up to the game when, you're going against an All-American corner that week. You got to find ways to scheme guys open.
And it's Andy Kotelnicki that we're talking about. So tell us a little bit about his background, his history. If you're talking, I think, about having less talent and you're talking about Kansas, that's kind of got to be the case oftentimes.
100%. And even going back to Buffalo, I haven't seen as much of his tape over at Whitewater, but yeah, I mean, he's never had crazy talent wherever he's been. He's always had a few key guys. He had a couple NFL running backs at Buffalo. But just talking specifically with Kansas, I mean, he made hay with, guys that would not sniff the field in Happy Valley. So he has a history of having to move guys around, put them in different positions to be successful. And overcome talent deficiencies because in Kansas and in the Big 12 playing Texas, you're going to be mismatched pretty much everywhere. And they were the bottom of that conference for a long time. And I don't think the recruiting just magically flipped the script towards the end. It had a lot to do with his ability to, like I said, scheme guys open.
What is also often talked about with Andy Kotelnicki is he does a lot of motion, a lot of movement, the advantages of that movement prior to the snap. What does that do to the defense?
Well, let's even start with before that. So before you shift or motion, you're in a formation, right? Kotelnicki has formations where the quarterback will be lined up behind the center. Every offensive lineman will be aligned to the right of the center, 3 receivers on the left. And it's just unorthodox things that you can't game plan for as a defense. So you have to trust the rules that your defensive coaches give you, whether it's, let's treat the right guard as the center now if he's moved over 2 spots. It can get really complicated, and like I said, if you're not confident enough to make decisions on the snap as a defensive play caller, the middle linebacker, then you're going to be at a disadvantage immediately if you can't get lined up. And then transitioning into motions and shifts, this is just a way to, like formations, change the math at the snap. Little things like that can go a long way in scheming guys wide open when you might be at a talent deficiency.
There were some other things that you threw out that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned that for an Andy Kotelnicki offense, 40% of his pass attempts were also play action, which creates some deception, misdirection. I'm assuming that, again, is one of those things that could just give you that one step. A defender respecting the run play has to make that one step forward. And that's, again, the difference between a receiver being open or not.
Exactly. I mean, how many times watching football on Saturday or Sunday do you see like a quarterback thread the needle off of play action? I can think of like a couple examples of Tyler Warren or Theo Johnson, just being open a hair last year. But talking specifically to Kansas, they run a lot of these tight end pop passes that off of play action where we'll pull a guard in a trap protection. So the offensive line sliding one way and pulling a guard as if it's like a counter or a trap run. That will make the linebackers, fit their gaps immediately and create windows to throw behind them.
Well, I'm glad we're talking tight end because, oh, by the way, Penn State has a really good one in Tyler Warren. Probably as good an athletic tight end as there may be in the entire country. So now Andy Kotelnicki, has he ever had a tight end like that? And what does a weapon like that mean to Andy Kotelnicki? How will he use him?
I'm expecting everything. I mean, a couple of years ago, he was taking snaps at Wildcat quarterback, so I wouldn't be surprised if that came back. If the tape shows anything from last year, especially in the last couple games where Kotelnicki was on the sideline, it's that Tyler Warren needs the ball early and often. I think to that play at Ole Miss where Aller threw it across his body. It was a terrible, terrible decision, but Warren was able
Yes.
to somehow take it up the sideline. I don't think he scored, but he got close. But I can't imagine Andy Kotelnicki stood on the sideline and wasn't immediately thinking of different ways to get him the ball. In the spring game, I noticed a couple tight end screens. That was something they did last year, so that's concept familiarity. And then he'll get the ball on the perimeter as well. I think any way possible, swing screens, and then your typical tight end pop passes, option routes. I look for literally the kitchen sink, I think, to be thrown at Tyler.
Let's talk a little bit more about, specifically methods of getting that wide receiver open, getting a step on the defender. You talked about his Andy Kotelnicki's use of pick plays or rub plays, bordering on the illegal pick, but this is part of football. But how does he make use of that?
Well, you got to be a good actor, so you got to take the receivers to acting school. But this goes back to the scheming guys open thing, because when you're out or when you have an advantage defensively. So if I'm a D coordinator and I know that we got all American defensive backs, we're going to play man coverage. So he saw a lot of man coverage when he was at Kansas. So you have to find ways to pick players, and if you can really hit some home runs if you execute it properly. It can be as simple as a slant flat, when in reality it's really slant pick. And then it's usually the slant receiver's responsibility to run right off of that pick guy's shoulder. And then other ways you can, like I said, this unbalanced stuff, getting in bunch but loose bunch. So again, it's making the defensive side, well, would coach be mad if I deciphered this as a bunch or not? So it's just really towing the line of what the defense's rules are.
It is fascinating. And again, it doesn't take much to create an opening for a receiver. Just get that one more step, even half a step. That could be the difference between a completion or not. All right, Shane, we've got 1 minute left to go in the show. What is it that our listeners should know about Andy Kotelnicki and what he could do to get the wide receivers open that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I'm going to bore you, but he can run some pretty core concepts just tailored to beat specific coverages. So this goes back to your ability to game plan. If you know that you're going to line up in a specific formation, you're going to get a specific coverage. Maybe a boring old curl flat concept is going to work and get you 10, 12 yards. And if you know you're catching cover 4, that's a great opportunity to throw a post. So just little things like that. I think film study can really be the difference.